grab your beverages and turn up your interweb. It's time for the Dudes and Beer Fantasy Football Podcast.
Fantasy freaks and geeks, what is up? Welcome to the Week 7 preview of the Dudes and Beer Fantasy Football Podcast. I am pleased to be joined by the original co-host of the Dudes and Beer Fantasy Football Podcast, Adam Natras. Glad to have you back, bro. How you doing?
Hey, glad to be back. You know, I got to swallow a few words as we go in through this based on previous conversations.
Yeah, I'm gonna have you take your medicine on the Vikings receivers, or at least one of them.
Oh God.
Me and Adam are both coming off of a little cold, so if we sound a little raspy, we apologize, but we're going to truck on through for our listeners. We are dedicated to you guys.
It's what they call fall in the Northeast if you're not from the region.
Mm-hmm. We're going to start part one of this podcast talking about some winners and losers from last week with our Cheers to You, Pour One Out segment. We're going to do our little DFS segment. Adam's going to give you guys his top dollar guys, his low value, his low dollar top value guys, and we're going to talk a little bit of trade, and then we'll jump right into the Thursday night game, which is Broncos at Cardinals, and then we'll look at the other two NFC West teams, Rams at 49ers. We'll take a little break, and we'll come back with part two with all of the other games. So why don't we jump right into Cheers to You, Pour One Out, and we'll start with Latavius Murray. Saved my ass in my standard league. Right at game time, I saw Dalvin Cook was officially ruled out. Latavius Murray was available, thank God, and I picked him up, and he produced big time for me. Had that huge, a 24-point game or something in a standard league, I think it was?
All I know is I've picked up and dropped Latavius Murray more times this year, other than the one time it actually counted.
That sucks. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, me too.
The next guy is Kareem Hunt. A couple weeks ago, we were talking about whether or not people should be worried about him, and I had mentioned that his production in the pass game was down significantly from last year, and it was great to see him come back last week with a huge game in the pass game. I think he had over 100 receiving yards, had the touchdown. Definitely was way more involved than he had been all season. And the next cheers to you for me is the combo of Doug Baldwin and Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, 2 straight games of 3 touchdowns. Doug Baldwin had come into last week complaining about his use. He only had that one target, caught it for 1 yard. And Russell Wilson definitely hurt him because they used him a lot last week, and thank God they did. They got the win over there in jolly old London. As far as cheers to you, you got anybody you want to cheers to?
I do. Valdez-Scanlon coming on strong for the second week in a row for the Packers. Anybody that did daily fantasy or maybe had gotten on the Geronimo Allison or Randall Cobb train, that's week 2 for him to plug and play. Aaron Rodgers is looking at him. So God bless that kid, and thank you very much, Valdez. I had a nice Sunday because of you, or Monday, I should say. And then Tyreek Cohen. We've talked about him here before on the show, just with Matt Nagy. It looked originally like, maybe they were going to stick that Jordan Howard route. But I'll tell you, if you started Tyreek Cohen last week, you were probably not upset.
No, not at all.
And then my Pour One Outs. Now, these ones affect me a little bit more personally, if you will. Yeah. If you hear my voice quiver a little bit, that's because these are 2 direct Adam losses in fantasy this week. Will Fuller, where have you been, man?
Yeah, he's kind of been hurting me too, man. I'm right there with you.
I thought you were one of those original boomer bust candidates that was a boom. Past 2 weeks, looks like a bust. We're going to pour one out for you and stick you on the bench.
And it seems, I don't know if it's just the emergence of Kiki QT or
where that ball
or the hamstring injury or whatever it was. But yeah, man, I was saying before the season that I thought, besides Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, I thought they were the biggest deep threat in the league, and it just hasn't been.
And you know what? Even in the beginning of the season, they were.
That's true.
And my next, even bigger, pour one out. Thank you for the swift kick in the nuts. Devontae Freeman.
Oof.
Oh, boy. If you drafted Devontae, it was within the first 2, maybe the 3rd round if you got lucky. Goodbye, Devontae. 8 weeks later, we're not going to see you during a fantasy season that counts.
I think he was like the last of the first round running backs.
He was.
Or, he was
top of the RB2s, we'll call him on my team. Right. Doesn't matter. Goodbye, Devontae.
Yeah, it sucks. I'm glad I didn't draft him in any of my leagues. But, yeah, it sucks for those Freeman owners. But, hey, gives everybody else an opportunity. You have if there's a team out there that's hurting in the win column and they had Devontae Freeman, try and sell high on one of your running backs because most likely that person is going to be hurting for running backs.
I couldn't agree more.
As far as pour one out goes, for me, it's these two receivers that got hurt last week. You saw Amari Cooper go down with the concussion. Quincy Nunez got the high ankle sprain. Should be out, I think they said 4 to 6 weeks, which really sucks. But that should clear things up a little bit for that Jets passing game. They surprisingly, they have some pretty decent targets to throw to for Sam Darnold.
I'm interested to see how Kearse does in that flex position. When a new one went down, he really did seem to step up and get the targets. Yeah. Is that going to be consistent?
It seems like he's going to be their primary slot receiver. You got Robbie Anderson running all those deep routes, and you got Terrell Pryor running pretty much all the intermediate stuff. So it seems like Javon Kearse is going to be that guy, running those middle option routes. So,
sometimes when these teams put a little bit more of an explosive player in there as opposed to the the bigger guy,
right.
Initially it tends to work out rather well because the quarterback's not used to that speed there. We saw it with Nelson Aguilar last year in the slot for the Eagles. It does shore up, but initially they do come on strong. The faster guy in that slot.
Right. My next pour one out goes to the entire Jacksonville team, not just their offense, not just their defense, the whole team. Blake Bortles was absolutely atrocious last week. The defense let the Cowboys come in, who was one of the just lowest. I think they were in the bottom 3 as far as scoring goes in the league, and they went up and put a whooping.
Cole Beasley.
Yeah, man.
Come on, Jalen Ramsey. You're going to talk all this? Cole Beasley.
Yeah, another one of these small, shifty slot receivers that gets open and gets all of his production after the catch. To me, it's a team that their identity is gone. Without Leonard Fournette, they are a run the ball first team and play defense, and they don't have their running back. So, a power team like that doesn't have that force set in the table early in games, they just don't look like themselves, and I don't think they will until they get the big man back.
You know who Bortles reminds me a lot of is Christian Ponder. Comes out strong.
Christian Ponder.
You didn't expect to hear that name, did you?
No, not at all.
But you can't tell me the similarities aren't there. Comes out strong one year, all of a sudden it's, maybe he's not a starting quarterback in the NFL.
Well, I mean, Bortles has had a couple good games this year, especially against the Patriots. He lit them up, but
look at the list of backups that have. Nick Foles won the Super Bowl.
He did.
So they're all NFL quarterbacks, but a starter and a.
I don't know if I would consider Nathan Peterman a NFL starting quality quarterback, but he got some playing time last week. So
if there weren't for the Nathan Petermans, there'd be no Blake Bortles.
That's true.
Apparently, you can't have 32 starting quarterbacks.
The next guy, to me, pouring one out for Carlos Hyde. 2 straight weeks, no touchdowns. He's showing that he is a touchdown or bust guy. And it seems like they're going to be starting to move the ball around a little bit more to their running backs. Hugh Jackman has said now for 2 straight weeks that he wants to get Nick Chubb more involved. Another one of these rookie running backs. Teams don't draft rookie running backs to sit on the bench. That's probably the one position where when you're drafted, you're expected to produce right away. And so by the end of the season, I really expect Carlos Hyde to be in the back of that backfield. You got anybody else you want to pour one out for?
No, I'm still mourning the loss of my wide receiver 2 and running back 2. So for right now, I'm just going to say a little prayer and hope it gets better.
All right, why don't we move to your daily fantasy stuff, as I like to call it? Because
well, this week, I'm happy to make this transition because I'm going to put this out there now. I think that the guys that win the big money, if you will, they're going to have some money left on the table this week when going through who to pick. We were talking before the show. There's really only 1.5 big names that you could look at this week and be like, okay.
Top dollar.
That's a guy I'm willing to spend up on. Past that, the top guys have the worst matchups. We're going to start a quarterback. I really like Baker's matchup this week. Baker Mayfield at 7,100.
Hopefully that ankle injury doesn't.
It looks like it looks like it's all right. And if that ankle injury does worry you, the other quarterback that I think is just going to come out and all signs point to go is Joe Flacco at 7,500. So you're really looking at a $400 difference between the two. And Baker's playing Tampa Bay, Flacco's playing New Orleans.
Real quick, in my my full point PPR league, I went 0 RB in that league, so I had Aaron Rodgers. And this week with him on bye, I got to pick up another quarterback, so I'm not going to carry 2 quarterbacks. When am I ever going to play anybody but Aaron Rodgers?
Right.
If Baker wasn't available, so I had to go with Joe Flacco, and I'm expecting big things from him.
I don't think you're going to regret that decision.
He's good at home, man.
And if we're being honest with everybody, Flacco is probably the more secure quarterback for this week. I've just got Baker eyes going on to see what he can do against this porous Tampa Bay defense.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But Joe Flacco's got the weapons. And in fact, we're going to get into that because after we get to running back, I'll gladly highlight. So moving down to running back this week, if you don't go Todd Gurley against the Niners, I know he's $10,200. You don't normally see players in FanDuel get up that high. You normally tap out maybe high 9s, but very rarely in a full slate do you catch somebody go over 10. Let's be honest, folks. There's a reason for that.
Yes, Todd Gurley is by far and away the best player in fantasy football,
Absolutely.
In regular football, in Madden. Doesn't matter what kind of football you're playing, Todd Gurley's the best.
Especially when you start looking at the other running back matchups this week. Todd Gurley's playing the Niners. He's going to have a good game. Past that, who the other running back that I keep honing in on?
Who's that?
That would be Tyreek Cohen again.
Okay.
Now, the reason I think Tyreek is a good running back, now, if Sony Michel is healthy, I know Chicago's defense is there, but it almost doesn't matter with New England. They'll figure a way to get that kid the ball. But Tyreek Cohen playing New England at 6,600, I think that Matt Nagy's going to have to come up with interesting ways to move the ball. We all know New England. New England has never had a flat game after a big one. Bill Belichick, that's one of the best things him and Brady are making sure they don't miss a step after a big game. Well, they just had one. Mm-hmm. They overcame a shootout. I imagine that Chicago's going to have to throw the ball.
83 points scored in that Kansas City New England game.
Right.
Holy crap.
And I think, and we just talked about Kareem Hunt had a great game.
Right.
I think now it could be Jordan Howard, obviously, but I think they're going to need to throw the ball to keep pace. I think Tyreek Cohen is such a weapon. He really helps Trubisky keep on fire.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to have a pretty delicious stat for you guys later as far as New England allowing receiving yards and receptions to running backs. So, yeah, I'm right there with you.
So,
Tyreek Cohen's a guy.
I'm not even going to go outside those two. I mean, you look at the rest of the matchups, you're going to have a hard time justifying another running back outside those two. There are going to be options. I'm not going to pretend there aren't, but
I got a couple cheaper running backs that we'll get to in part 2 when we go through the majority of the games.
Exactly. You're going to start getting into
called
the
a teaser,
weeds.
people. I'm learning a little bit here. We're still rookies at this,
right.
but the teaser is real.
Now, getting into this little transition for you to the receivers, I mentioned Joe Flacco. I will have some combination of 2 Baltimore receivers on every lineup that I do, more or less. The reason I say some combination, Willie Snead has not had the biggest of games yet.
But he's been super consistent.
His targets have been there every game.
Right.
Receptions, every game. They're playing New Orleans, folks. If there's a game where Willie Snead's sneaking into that end zone, I'm going to say it's this weekend.
Real quick, as far as the flex position goes, I know, so FanDuel, it's 3 wide receivers, 1 flex, right?
Mm-hmm. That is correct.
So do you, because FanDuel is 75, 0.75 PPR, so it's 3/4 of a point for
right.
Do you always try and have a wide receiver in your flex spot, or do you just go by matchups?
So
whatever?
I'm trying to base it on the matchup because nowadays you'll have a running back go out and get 9 catches.
Right.
So like the Tyreek Cohen theory. I mean, you're going to have running backs that outproduce receivers.
Right.
I really
in the pass game, Alex.
right.
Yeah.
And then we'll add in the rushing, and then you never know.
Right.
So this week I have a receiver in the flex pretty much across the board, except I do have some 2 tight end sets this week because there are some delicious tight end matchups.
Really? Okay. Running with the 2 tight end set.
But ultimately, I'm basing it on guys that are going to get the volume no matter how it comes.
Right.
Because some weeks you're going to have, just the most random of occurrences. And you try to mitigate that. I like to get my flex. So when I do this, one of my receivers, I'll go low. I like to leave as much money for the flex as possible. That's where I'm going to go top dollar if I can, whether it be Antonio Brown or David Johnson or Christian McCaffrey. Flex is where I go top dollar.
So flex is the last spot you fill. Okay.
I'll fill the defense first, the tight end first, because then I can sit there and play the matchup according to what I think the best overall outcome is going to be, which, to swallow my words and as you let in, one of my flexes this week is Thielen.
Okay, nice.
Because
makes sense, dude.
That Jets defense they're good, but they let up some passing
receivers.
yards. Yeah. And Thielen every single week has proved me wrong since day one.
And it's not just against number ones; it's against
everybody.
You look at what Andrew Luck did last week. This dude distributes the ball more than anybody in the league, I feel like, and he was just picking us apart. But we got lucky with. I keep referring to we. I am a Jet fan. In case you got any new listeners here, but we got lucky with that defensive touchdown and some big plays. So, but yeah, man, those receivers were definitely eaten against the Jets last week.
And Thielen comes in at a little higher than normal. He's normally around 81, 8,300. This week he's 8,700.
You think that's because of the matchup?
That's because of the matchup. Now, if you think that's a little high, go Stephon Diggs. Diggs is down there this week. He's back around the 8s.
See, it's interesting to me is that last week it seemed like the Vikings were playing the Cardinals, and it seemed like they put Patrick Peterson on Stephon Diggs.
Well, he's the real deep threat. I mean, Thielen's not the deep threat comparative between the two. So,
but wouldn't it make sense to put your best corner on their best receiver?
Sometimes it's athlete on athlete.
That's weird.
You know what I mean? You could have a bit of a slower corner on Thielen if he's quick side to side. Thielen's great at routes. Diggs has got some speed.
Right. Okay.
I think that's how they distribute it. Not just my guess. I'm with you. Figure out how to stop them any way you can, right?
That's something I want to get more into. I think I might have to subscribe to one of these websites because I want to be able to dive in more to cornerback wide receiver matchups to give you guys some more insight on wide receiver matchups for sure.
And then last but not least, the tight end, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to tell you Baker Mayfield without saying my boy Njoku. Now, if you watch Hard Knocks, I mean, this kid is a beast in terms of just physical presence, athletic ability, and it's really, really starting to look.
He mossed over a pretty good corner last week.
And it's looking like there's a little flavor between Baker and David over there.
For sure, yeah.
So I'm going Njoku at 5,700. I think the matchup's prime, waiting to be picked. I did mention that there are some double tight ends I have. Mm-hmm. That's because I think Zach Ertz is getting the volume against, I know that Carolina's defense against the tight end, we'll get into that. But certain guys, the volume's there. I think you're going to see at least, 8 to 10 targets. So I do have a combination of that. And then you have Gronk. It's just Gronk.
It's Gronk, yeah.
It's Gronk. If you're willing to go spend $7,600 on Gronk, I'm probably going to $7,500 on Zach Ertz instead. But, I understand. It's Gronk. I'm never going to say no to Gronk.
I think I saw a stat where Gronk is now getting, I think it was 14 or 15% target share since, they brought in, with Edelman back,
right,
with James White absorbing so many targets out of the backfield, with Josh Gordon emerging. That's not going to be consistent. He's not going to stay at 15%. There's no way.
No.
He's too much of a threat for the Patriots.
Him and Brady have the greatest relationship. When they're near the end zone, you'll see these receivers or running backs pop up. Brady always looks to Gronk still. He's still looking for him. Whether or not he's open, he's still looking at him.
And I think you're dead on with Ertz. I think he's, by the end of the season, I think we're going to be saying
he's the best tight end in the league.
Yeah.
And that's not just me being the Philadelphia homer. That's statistically speaking.
Yes. Kelsey's. I think it's going to be between him and Kelsey. I think at the end of the season, with as we just highlighted, all these weapons that the Patriots have in the passing game, I think we're going to see a small decrease in Gronk's production, and Kelsey and Ertz are going to be right up there. So
I'm with you.
I want to get into a little bit of trade talk here. Kind of got into a trade beef in one of my leagues.
Is this directed at me for being the loser that has Devontae Freeman and Kenyon Drake on the same team?
No, I swear, it's really not.
It should be.
So, as I was saying, I kind of got into a trade beef in one of my leagues. I made a low ball offer, but it was an initial offer.
Sometimes you just have to try.
And dude, that's how it goes. I offer you low, you come back at me high, and we meet in the middle. Is that not how a deal works? But of course, people get butthurt and they get all upset, and it kind of squashes it. But in a league, the Le'Veon Bell owner was 1-4. I made an offer to him. He declined it, and of course went on to our league board and started talking crap. And I pretty much told him, like, bro, you're 1-4 right now. In that league, there's a 5-0 team and there's 5 4-1 teams. So it's a 12-team league. 6 teams get in. You need to win, or you're by the end of next week. If he doesn't have another win, because he lost again this week, so he's 1-5 now. He's going to be out of the league halfway through the season,
right?
So
without a doubt,
you have one more week waiting for Le'Veon to come back, and when he does come back, he's got Cleveland, who last year, I think was one of the worst Le'Veon Bell games against Cleveland, and this defense looks a hell of a lot better this year than it did last year. And
James Conner's been the hot hand.
And then the week after, he's got Baltimore, which is in the top 3 in the bottom 3 in fantasy points allowed to every single position. They're an awesome defense. They're the number 1 defense in fantasy right now, actually. And then I think he's Carolina after that, which is not a bad matchup. But then you got Jacksonville the week after that. So, Le'Veon coming back, you got one more week of him just sitting on your bench doing nothing. If he comes back to the Steelers, and if they do bring him back, and if they do actually make him active, he's got all these horrible matchups to come back for the first 4 weeks. After that Jacksonville matchup, you're looking at week 10 in the fantasy season. If you're 2-5 or 3-6 or whatever it's going to be, or 3-4, whatever, you're out, dude. So make a move, get rid of Le'Veon, get some guys that are going to get you a win, so you can actually, be competitive and actually have a chance going forward.
I'm going to guess a lot of Le'Veon owners are probably in a similar boat because it's such a hard thing to come back from.
And I mean, how many people drafted Le'Veon first overall or with a top 3 pick? I feel like if you go into your league and look at who the Le'Veon Bell owner is, I'm willing to bet that the overwhelming majority of those owners they probably have a losing record right now.
Unless they listened to us 3 weeks prior and we said the Pittsburgh Steelers are always a team you take a handcuff on.
Right.
Sorry, but we were right.
Yeah. And one of the arguments that came up in this trade discussion was how when Le'Veon comes back, he's going to be a top 5 running back and this and that. And if you listen to Big Ben, he's not happy with Le'Veon.
No, none of them are. None of them are. The offensive line isn't.
No.
They all know he's gone next year, so why are they going to put out for this guy that's not going to be there?
Right. And he's Ben Roethlisberger straight up said when Le'Veon comes back, he wants James Conner to still have a consistent role.
And why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you?
And if you look at what the Steelers did this offseason, one of the arguments was, Big Ben's not the coach. He doesn't make those decisions. Newsflash, bro. They got rid of Todd Haley last year because Big Ben didn't like him.
Right.
Big Ben is the offensive coordinator there just as much as
welcome to the NFL. The star quarterback makes the calls. Yes. If you don't think so, you get shipped out.
Right, dude. So and this guy was the quarterback coach for the past couple of years.
Right.
If Ben Roethlisberger says, I don't want Le'Veon Bell on the field, for 90% of the time, like he has been over his entire career, it's not going to happen. If he wants James Conner there, James Conner's going to play.
Right, and they already know they're not going to get anything for Le'Veon. He walks.
Right.
So they have no incentive other than to maybe run this dude into the ground. But let's not sleep on the fact that's a long time away from the actual game of football.
The dude has not worn a helmet since January.
Right. You can work out all you want.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We see it in the first 4 to 5 weeks every season. Right. There is a lot to be said for playing actual football.
Yes. You got to get hit. You got to be in game condition. You got to
work with your offensive line.
Right. There's no way the dude just comes back and all of a sudden is a 20 carry guy a game.
Not right
it's
off.
It's not going to happen. Maybe by that Carolina game we might see that, but
you're probably still not in it at that point anyways.
Yeah. And all this, like, no one has any idea what's going to happen with this situation. We can all speculate all we want, but no one has any clue what the Steelers are going to do about Le'Veon Bell. There's a very good chance that he comes back and becomes a complete split timeshare with James Conner.
I think your best bet with Le'Veon Bell is right before he comes back. It's time to trade him because that might be your highest value.
Right.
We could be wrong, but there's a good chance you're not in a position where it really matters, does it?
Like the one guy in that league said in a different league, he traded Mike Evans and Jordan Howard for Le'Veon Bell. And I said, you gave up way too much, bro.
Way too much.
Way too much. He said, oh, well, I have Gurley and Ingram, so I can afford to do that. That's great. He was also 4-1. That's great. But when you're 1-4, you got to make moves. You got to get some more wins in your, on that side of your standings.
I would say I don't know if I want the question mark of Ingram and Le'Veon Bell together.
Right, yeah.
I mean, what have you seen from Ingram other than the one game he came back that would say, you know what? Another good guy to have is another question mark.
I mean, last year, yes, the tandem of Ingram and Kamara was, I think, the best two running backs.
They definitely were a good
NFL
1-2
history,
punch. But
I mean, that's not going to happen 2 years in a row. I seriously doubt it.
Right, and don't forget, Kamara, other than this past week, has come out like a bat out of hell.
Yes.
So why would you try to take away from that too often?
So, long story short, if you have a losing record and you're holding on to somebody thinking, oh, this guy's going to really come back and I'm going to go on a 8-win streak to finish the season and I'm going to make the playoffs and he's going to carry me through the playoffs. If that's how you feel, good for you. I strongly disagree. I feel like if you have a guy and you're losing big time, you're 1-5.
Slap the shipping label on him and FedEx him out.
Right. Get some guys that are going to get you a win this week so you can actually be competitive and not be eliminated from the league halfway through the year.
Right. Le'Veon can come back strong, but if you have no chance of making the playoffs, enjoy the consolation round. I don't know what to tell you.
Exactly. Let's move to the Thursday night football game here. We got the Denver Broncos going to Arizona to play the Cardinals. This is...
At one point, that would have been a fun game to watch.
This is a do-or-die game, I feel like, for the Broncos defense. They have given up, I think they're the first team in NFL history to allow 200-plus rushing yards to a single running back 2 straight weeks. I don't think it's going to happen for a third week in a row, but they are absolutely horrible against the run. So this is as good of a week to feel comfortable about playing David Johnson as there's going to be. And I mean, if you look at this game in a whole, I mean, it's probably going to be one of these boring Thursday night games that we've become accustomed to over the past couple of years. But I see, like I said, I see David Johnson having a big game. I see Patrick Peterson covering Demaryius Thomas more so than Emmanuel Sanders, just because of the big body that he has, because of the red zone threat that he's supposed to be. But over the past 2 weeks, we've seen Demaryius score a touchdown every week. In the past 2, so maybe he's coming on. Maybe the Broncos look at that and say, maybe the Cardinals look at that and say maybe the Broncos are trying to refocus on getting Demaryius the ball. You're giving me the evil eye. Will you disagree there?
Oh, no, I'm all for it. I just think that somehow sneakily Emmanuel Sanders, I don't know why defensive coordinators haven't been like, you know what, let's stop this guy.
Right.
And let's make Demaryius beat us finally, since it just seems like each week, good defense or not, Emmanuel Sanders does something.
Yeah, I was checking out Pro Football Focus earlier, and they project Patrick Peterson to shadow Demaryius Thomas. I mean, if I was the defensive coordinator, I think I would say go cover Emmanuel Sanders.
Is it that different than the Thielen? I mean, I get Demaryius and Thielen are different,
right,
but is it really that different of a conversation than the Thielen and Diggs? I mean,
right,
in my mind, it really isn't. I mean, Demaryius is obviously more athletic. Thielen runs a better route, but Emmanuel Sanders and Diggs, and they're a very similar receiver.
Right. And it seems like they move Emmanuel around a hell of a lot more than they move Demaryius around. So maybe that plays into it. Maybe Pro Football Focus is saying maybe the Cardinals aren't really looking to have Patrick Peterson, running all over the field. They kind of want him staying in one spot. But we'll see. That's going to be an interesting watch to see what the Broncos do with, what the Cardinals do with Patrick Peterson. And on the other side of the ball, Pro Football Focus also projects that Larry Fitzgerald is the one that draws Chris Harris because it seems like he's been working a lot more in the slot than outside this season. And obviously that's where Larry Fitzgerald makes his money. So I think this is a clear game to sit Larry Fitzgerald. You look at the other receivers for the Cardinals, Christian Kirk has definitely emerged as a solid number one receiver for them. I don't know if I would consider him that in fantasy, but last week he had the 770 yards on the 7 targets, caught 6 passes, and Ricky Seals-Jones has become probably their second leading target guy and second look for rookie Josh Rosen in the middle of the field there. So, but the Broncos defense is not what it used to be at all. So this is definitely not as scary of a matchup as it may have looked coming into the season. So, like I said, start David Johnson. I would sit Larry Fitzgerald. You could probably play Christian Kirk if you have to. And if you've been riding with Ricky Seals-Jones, keep riding him because, it seems like Josh Rosen likes him. So that's the Thursday night game, and we're going to move on to the other NFC West teams, not including the Seattle Seahawks who are on bye, but the Los Angeles Rams going up north in California to play the San Francisco 49ers. Interesting stuff about these two teams as far as the fantasy points allowed to running backs in the pass game. Both of them are tied for 7th most receptions allowed to running backs. So we know how much Kyle Shanahan likes to use his running backs in the pass game. So this could be another big game for Breida, at least in the pass game. The Rams are giving up the 9th fewest points to running backs, but like I said, they're giving up a lot of receptions to running backs, and that's Kyle Shanahan's thing. So I can see Breida catching quite a few passes. Alfred Morris was a huge disappointment last week. Breida, all week it seemed like Breida was going to miss. It seemed like Alfred Morris was going to be the guy. And then this other dude, Raheem Mostert, came in.
Lo and behold.
Yeah, he just came in.
Alfred Morris lost his job.
He got 1 carry, which, it was on the goal line, but it was called back for, I think, holding. So if you had Alfred Morris, I think it's safe to say you can drop him until we see how they're going to use him more, because if this Raheem Mostert guy comes in and starts taking that RB2 spot, then I think Alfred Morris really doesn't have any value at all. And then you look at Chris Godwin. So the Rams last week,
Marquise Goodwin.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What did I say?
Chris Godwin. That's my boy.
Godwin.
They're
so similar,
I agree.
And not just by the spelling of their last name. Last week, the Rams allowed at least 1 explosive play, which is over 20 yards, to all 3 of the big 3 of the Bronco wide receivers, right? So, and we saw Marquise Goodwin last week. He had that 67-yard bomb touchdown. He had the 30-yard touchdown. That's what he does. He makes big plays in the pass game. So I can see him having a big game as well. With the Rams giving up all these explosive plays. I know the week before against the Seahawks, they gave up quite a few explosive plays as well. So I think those are the 2 guys as far as the 49ers that you can roll with this week, Goodwin and Breida. And obviously George Kittle, he's so involved there. If you've been riding them, keep riding them. Again, these tight ends are impossible to figure out. So if you have a tight end that's getting 6-7 targets a game, you're going to play him. Moving over to the Rams side of the ball, Jared Goff did not look great. Cold. It was outside in Denver. And that whole narrative was being blown up before the game started about a UCLA guy playing in the cold, and he didn't really look all that great. He had 200 yards, an interception. I think the big thing from this game was seeing Cooper Kupp go down with that knee injury. He was able to return to the field, but he didn't get on the field. He didn't play in any snaps after, but they were blowing it out, so they didn't really need him at that point. But if you're a Jared Goff owner and Cooper Kupp is not playing, are you still playing? Are you still playing Goff, playing in California and in San Francisco?
Oh yeah,
right. Yeah,
oh yeah,
I agree.
I'm going heavy Goff on the other, with the rest of the team there.
Right. Yeah. Robert Woods should have another big game if Cooper Kupp is out, and even if he's not out, you're playing all three of these Rams wide receivers every week. They're all so good. You never know which one of them is going to go off for a big game, and it seems like every single one of them has a big game. At least one of them has a big game every week. Last week, Robert Woods caught 7 of his 10 targets for 109 yards. Great game for him. And we can't go without saying Todd Gurley, as we talked about earlier, but he deserves us talking more about him. He is the man. He's the best player in fantasy football. He had 28 carries, 208 yards rushing. That's a lot of yards, and he had 2 touchdowns. So he's the beast. He's the best. He's the one that everybody wants. I don't know if you can even...
If you have Todd Gurley, you're starting him. I mean, we
Yeah,
could tell you stats all you want, but you're not even questioning it.
Right.
It doesn't matter who he's
It's
playing.
almost a waste of time to even just bring him up because everybody knows if you have him, you're playing
He's
him.
your top player. You drafted him as your top player, and he's acting like a top player.
Yeah.
Start Todd Gurley.
So that does it for part 1 of the Dudes and Beer Fantasy Football Podcast Week 7 preview. Me and Adam are going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back with part 2 with all of the remaining games. And make sure you stay tuned for that. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to part 2 of the Week 7 preview of the Dudes and Beer Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for coming back with us. We got the whole rest of the Week 7 slate ahead. We have it broken down so that the first section is the set of AFC East versus NFC North games. And then we have it broken down into the AFC South games and so on. So you'll be able to see in the description, what groups of games we're doing at what time, so you guys can pinpoint certain games you want to listen to if you're in a hurry or whatever. So we're gonna jump right into the first of our part 2 games. Like I said, we got an NFC North versus AFC East game. The Vikings coming off of a win against Arizona. My New York Football Jets coming off of a win against the Colts. Let's see. Vegas has this game as the Vikings are the favorite by 3.5 points. We got some defenses that are good against some positions and bad against other positions. We were talking earlier about how weird it is to see, for example, the Jets are giving up the 8th most fantasy points to wide receivers, yet they're giving up the 3rd fewest points to tight ends. So weird splits. It is still, only 6 games into the season, so probably by week 8 we'll see some of this stuff start to level out. But on the Vikings side of the ball, Kirk Cousins has been on fire. I think he's right now the number 3 quarterback in fantasy. Get ready for it, Adam. You're about to take it, bro.
Well, if we all remember, I ate my words early because I did say there was one player on that team I drafted other than Dalvin Cook, and it was Kirk Cousins.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, what is it? Would be one of those ones where it's do not as I say and do as I do.
Adam Thielen is
a beast,
bro.
He's the white wonder.
He's averaging over 13 targets a game. 13 targets a game for a wide receiver. I swore to
myself I would never, ever see, and let's be honest, people, this is the NFL. I swore to myself I would never see a white receiver used as an actual wide receiver 1.
Right, he's not a slot guy.
Right, like don't give me this New England nonsense because not one of them's an actual outside wide receiver.
Right.
Every one of them makes their bread and butter. Even Chris Hogan on these weird inseam routes and not Thielen. He is the Gordon Hayward of the NFL.
So, 13 plus targets a game. He's averaging 118 yards per game.
Unbelievable.
Through 6 games. I'm pretty sure that's a NFL record there. We kind of had a disagreement before the season started as far as these Vikings wide receivers go.
I was wrong. I was basing that off of Kirk Cousins' previous, experience throwing to nonsense, and
we're seeing what he can do when you actually give him a
some talent.
solid
Right.
group.
This
of
is not
receivers.
Terrell Pryor on the outside,
right? Like we said earlier, Latavius Murray had an awesome game. If Dalvin Cook is pronounced out again, which I think he will be, we were talking earlier.
So as of today, they said he's playing.
Okay.
As of today. As of last week, I think as of today, we heard the same thing.
Right.
So at this point, even if he plays, he's not going to come in with 20 carries.
Dude, these guys coming off of knee injuries, whether it's an ACL, an MCL, PCL, LCL, it doesn't matter. You always, at least that's how it feels like to me, unless your name is Adrian Peterson and you're obviously not human. It seems like there's always a residual injury that comes from it, whether it's a calf or a hip or a hamstring.
These teams know how hard it is to get a running back, so they're going to protect them at all. I mean, especially a team like the Vikings that knows, if it's not this year, it still could be next year. We just got Kirk Cousins. Like, they're going to protect him. They're not going to just toss him out to the wall. Trust me, I would love it if I got to see 20 attempts from Dalvin Cook. I would love it.
Same. I got him in a league too, bro.
But guess what's not going to happen this week? You're not getting 20 attempts.
No. And that's what kind of sucks is like, if Dalvin does play, it almost feels like you can't start either of Murray or Calvin because how can you trust that they're going to get enough work to be viable? Maybe as a flex. But
I don't really know because up until last week, you really couldn't start Latavius with confidence either. So I think you have to play your cards correctly. Listen, if you have Latavius, I get it. You'd want to start him. This is one of those games where I might be wrong, but I might try and find another option because there's no clear cut. This is the guy.
And I mean, the Jets against running backs, they're not bad. They're not good. However, they are tied for the 9th most receptions allowed to running backs. So
that would point to Dalvin Cook.
It should, right? You would think.
But I think we've thought this a few games ago, and 8 snaps later, he was on the bench.
And then you look at the tight end position. It's not a great matchup for Kyle Rudolph. As we said earlier, the Jets giving up the 3rd most fantasy points to tight ends. But with the tight end landscape, this is as solid of a tight end as you can get. So you're going to play him.
There really are no plug and play tight ends this year. Well, there's a few, but
besides those top guys, obviously.
Well, I'm saying plug and play though. Like if you have Kyle Rudolph, who are you going on the waiver wire to look for?
Right.
So you're going to go Kyle Rudolph because it's just not that deep.
Yeah. For the Jets, it seems like Robbie Anderson is going to be the guy that unfortunately draws Xavier Rhodes. He's their deep threat. He's their outside guy. I really don't see the Vikings putting him on Terrell Pryor. Yes, Terrell Pryor has 2 straight games with a touchdown, but I don't know. I feel like Xavier Rhodes is going to be on.
He's going to be on
Robbie
the speed.
Anderson. Yeah, right. It would make sense. But I think the big guy to talk about here, as far as the passing game goes for the Jets, is Jermaine Kearse. He had 10 targets last week, caught 9 of them for 94 yards. I think by the end of the season, it seems like Jermaine Kearse is probably going to be the best wide receiver for the Jets, at least the most consistent. Maybe he doesn't have the most touchdowns, maybe he doesn't have the most yards, but I feel like he's going to be the most consistent because he's probably going to be the solid slot receiver. And for a rookie quarterback, that at least for the first couple games of the season, the Jets didn't seem to be wanting to throw the ball deep. So I think he's the guy to look for. When you look at the split for the running backs for the Jets, Powell and Crowell, they're pretty much dead even. Powell's averaging 12.5 attempts, whereas Crowell's averaging 11.5 attempts. Powell only has 1 touchdown so far this season, and it came in the passing game, so you got to figure he's probably due for another touchdown. So if you're deciding between the two of them, I would go Powell. I think Crowell's too hit or miss. He's too inconsistent. However, this is a odd number week, and if you go back and look at his splits, he sucks on the even number weeks, and he's like Hall of Fame caliber on odd number weeks, so it's kind of weird. But looking at the Vikings defense, their strength is against the run. They've given up the 8th fewest fantasy points to running back. So be weary. If you have to play him, put him in your flex. I wouldn't count on him as a 1 or 2. This is Powell I'm talking about. We are going to move on to the next AFC East game versus NFC North. We got the Patriots visiting the Chicago Bears. Patriots coming off of a win versus Kansas City in probably the highest scoring game of the season, and the Bears coming off of a just abysmal loss to the Brock Osweiler-led Miami
That defense
Dolphins.
just did not look like the defense we've seen up to this point. Now, my next statement I think will tie in nicely. You know what? I'm going to just put this out to you first before I say what I say, because I'm interested to see if Vegas agrees with me. Now, folks, yours truly and Vegas, we get along quite nicely. Their predictions, my predictions. We get off the players. They're not that far off. Tell me what Vegas favors the Patriots at this week. I'll tell you why.
The Patriots are -3.5 as of right now on Wednesday night.
And the reason that the Patriots are favored, and if I hedge in my bet, I would take that, is that Bill Belichick and Tom Brady in their tenure together, and I said this to you before actually, have never come off a big game and had a flat game next, ever. Bill Belichick, and one of the best thing he is at is taking that momentum and putting it to the next game.
Right.
They never fall flat. I'm going to take that bet and say, first off, Belichick's greatness is taking away your strength, right? Khalil Mack looked a little banged. He just wasn't himself last week. All of a sudden, Denver's moving the ball, no problem.
Miami.
At that point,
Brock Osweiler.
right? That's why I said Denver.
Right.
That's why I can't get Brock in Denver.
You have so many memories of Brock Osweiler being
I have so many memories of Denver and John Elway going with the most random selection of quarterbacks.
Although I guess if you really look at Brock Osweiler's career, his best season was with the Broncos, right?
That's where most of it, yeah, exactly. That's the only chance he truly, truly had.
Yeah.
But all right, so Miami, that's even worse. Miami moved the ball at will, right?
They really did.
If you don't think Bill Belichick's going to come in here this week and completely somehow take Khalil Mack out of that game. Now, Khalil Mack is he's a generational player. So there are times.
Easier said than done, right?
Right. There are times where this statement is going to be wrong. But you're at least going to see the Patriots do their best to remove him from the equation. With that in mind, obviously, I'm not going to sit here and tell you about Tom Brady, because chances are if you have Brady, that's your quarterback.
Yeah.
That's who you're starting.
You're one of the people
right.
that you're not rostering two quarterbacks.
It's like you said with Rodgers. You're not choosing over Brady, because your choice over Brady, you don't look at the matchup at that point. The guy I do like this week, now if he's healthy, I think Sony Michel is starting to show you the defense doesn't matter, because he plays with Tom Brady. So therefore, they're going to get him the ball in open space. That kid has shown you in open space he's a weapon. Now, he's a little banged up. If he is ruled out, I will have James White on quite a few lineups, mainly because I really do think that the Patriots are going to come out, they're going to try and score, and they're going to try and limit Trubisky's hot hand. Right. I know last week wasn't the most exciting, but he still put up some numbers. He moved the ball. I think that they're going to try and keep that, it won't be a whole ton of quick strikes once they get ahead. Now, to get ahead, I think we started to see Edelman's back. Brady loves that familiarity. He really does. Same reason I said if you have Gronk, you start Gronk. Brady familiarity with the receivers has shown you time and again that whoever's on the other side of the ball doesn't matter.
Right.
He is, as much as we all hate to say it, one of the best, if not the best ever, even at the age of 41.
Yes, he is.
So, again, the guys from the page, if you have Gronk, you start him. If you have Edelman, which I do, you start him.
Right.
Edelman is going to come on and get looked at. Now, Josh Gordon is an interesting one. Is he not? I think that...
Led the team in targets last week.
Right. I think that he's another one now that you start to say, you have Josh Gordon, you start him.
Yeah.
Because, again, you're talking the Patriots. The defense,
and he's only going to keep being more and more involved in that pass game.
If there's one team that has never cared about what a defense's strength is, they're going to take it out and do something with it. So I'm starting all my Patriots players in terms of the top names at each position. If you have Edelman or Gordon, I would start both of them. Obviously Gronk, and then Sony Michel or James White. Listen, if Sony Michel's healthy, it's hard for me to sit here and tell you James White. It really is, because they love this kid. If he's not, James White all day.
I mean, the Bears are giving up the fewest fantasy points to running backs right now.
Well, I'm not talking handing off. I think that if you're looking at this New England team, I think you'll see a lot of screen passes this week. Because remember, Khalil Mack is a generational player. The last thing you want is him
it's the
all
best way
over Brady.
It's the best way to beat a good pass rush is with the screen game.
Right.
However, Sonny Michel he wasn't targeted last week, and I think the week before that he either wasn't targeted or he only had one target. So he's really not all that involved in the pass game. And, obviously because James White was at least before this game, every week he was the most targeted player on that team. So
at Georgia, though, right? At Georgia, the tandem was Sonny Michel and Nick Chubb, right? Sonny Michel was originally the pass-catching back. I think it is really because of James White talent. I do think that Bill and Tom ideally would love for this kid to start getting more involved in the pass game. The more he shows his open field prowess, I think the more you're going to see them try and get him the ball.
So maybe this is the week that Sonny Michel is finally
that they're going to try and get him in that game.
Cool. Okay. At least on the other side of the ball, looking at the Bears, like I said earlier, the Patriots are giving up the 6th most receiving yards to running backs right now. So this is probably the week to play Tyreek Cohen, man. He had the 9 targets last week, 90 yards. He did have that fumble, but
the weeks he's been involved in the game like that, though, are the weeks Trubisky has been on fire.
And I mean, it just looks like Howard is slowing that offense down. He's a grind him out running back. He's not a quick pace running back.
Right, and it just doesn't look like Trubisky's that comfortable with him.
Yeah. Kudos to Paul. Last week he brought up how Taylor Gabriel may be the Bears version of Tyreek Hill, if that's possible. Paul definitely called that last week. So shout out to you, Paul. 3rd on the team in targets, but they are using him definitely in a similar way that Kansas City was using Tyreek Hill. So I think you start Tyreek Hill. I think you start, as you said, all those Patriots wide receivers.
Taylor Gabriel, these slips, it's all the beer. Come on, it's the Dudes and Beer podcast, so you got to forgive him.
I think it's the Patriots running backs that you might want to avoid just because of that matchup. But, like you said, maybe this is the week that Sonny Michel comes out and proves us all wrong. So let's move on to the last of the NFC North versus AFC South games. We got the Detroit Lions going down to Miami to play the Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins right now are in the top 7 as far as fewest fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends. Their defense is really not all that bad.
Sneaky good.
What they're not good at is defending the run. They are giving up the 6th most fantasy points to running backs. They're giving up the 3rd most receptions to running backs, 4th most receiving yards to running backs. So this may be the week to throw Theo Riddick into your lineup, a super cheap running back that could catch a lot of passes for you. And hopefully, coming off the bye, hopefully they realized, like, we have a really good running back in Kerryon Johnson. Hopefully they get him a little more involved because he has not been as involved as I think a lot of us would expect a rookie running back to be involved, especially a rookie running back with the stature that Kerryon Johnson came into the league with. The thing with the Lions that I really wanted to look at was Kenny Golladay versus Marvin Jones. So if you had to pick between one of the two, who are you going with the rest of the season?
I love Kenny Golladay.
Okay, good.
I loved Kenny Golladay. I
was afraid you were going to go Marvin Jones.
No, never. Kenny Galladay's been on my team. I had him last year. I think that, I love that kid. He's the Chris Godwin of the Detroit Lions. Give me him every day.
Kenny Golladay is averaging 2 more targets a game. He's averaging almost 40 more yards a game.
Right, it's Marvin Jones Jr., people. Come on. Come off of it, please.
Yeah, he's definitely the 3rd best receiver on that team. Yes, he's scored quite a few touchdowns on these bomb plays. But
you know what, though? I'm tired of hearing the talent involved in that. It's because they throw the ball 50 times a game.
Right.
If you throw the ball 50 times a game, sure, every Tom, Dick, and Harry's going to have a catch.
And then you look at the quarterbacks in this game. I mean, if you can, I would sit Matthew Stafford because, like I said, the Dolphins are giving up the 3rd fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. So if you can get away from Stafford, I would, but you probably can't with 4 teams on bye this week and 3 really good quarterbacks on bye, so you're probably stuck playing them.
Unless you were ahead of the curve there, because there was a certain individual we spoke about that seems to be on everybody's waiver wire, which
who, your boy Baker?
Baker's gone, man. Baker's on people's bench. He's the type that was scooped well early. No, how about the Joe Flacco? Never a fantasy household name, right? This might be the week where you say, "Hey Matt, take a seat. We're calling Joe in."
We got to talk about these Dolphins running backs real quick.
Do we?
Yeah, we do, dude. We really do.
Ask me what I hate, Matt, real quick, just please.
What do you hate, bro?
The Dolphins running back situation. Frank Gore, thank you for making sure that I am not at the top of my leagues right now.
I think these 2 running backs are solid flex plays from here on out.
You ever hear of the Grinch? Matt, everyone's heard of the Grinch, right?
Yeah, the Grinch stole Christmas.
I wouldn't touch you with a 50-foot pole. Listen, I have Kenyon Drake on both teams. I'm Grinching him till I see better. Nice fumble on the way into the end zone, Kenyon. Way to cry it out.
Yeah, I think that fumble may have lost him some goal line work. I think
the very limited goal line work he had in the first place.
Yeah, I think Frank Gore has now solidified himself as
you cry.
the goal line back there.
You cry on the football field, you deserve a spot on the bench.
I mean, I can respect the fact that he's super passionate about the game. Obviously, he cares about what he does. But it was just such a bad fumble.
Right.
Like he didn't even get touched.
That's my point. I think that the crying was just a spectacle to cover up a bad play.
He tripped and dropped the ball on the goal line. If it wasn't for the Bears defense, I guess just sleepwalking through this game, it would have cost them the game.
You know what? I want to say one thing. I should have said this before. Let me pour one out for Kenyon Drake.
Okay, yeah, he deserves to be on there for sure. The other guy that we should talk about is Albert Wilson. I think we were talking a little bit before the podcast started. He is by far the definition of boomer bust guy in fantasy football.
150 yards in the second half. I mean, he was non-existent in the first half. That's crazy.
The Vegas guys have this as a Dolphins plus 4.5. In case you're wondering.
Stay away.
That's not a game I want
to
go
away.
to.
Any team that's run 39 plays and somehow won a game, you don't just stay away from.
And against a team that's coming off a bye,
right?
Real quick, Paul wanted us to drop some of these Kenyon Drake stats.
Why, Paul? Why are you doing this to me? You're trolling me from home.
And this is interesting because these definitely have something to do with the fact that Jay Ajayi was traded to the Eagles. But in the first 9 games, Kenyon Drake had 19 attempts last year. He only had 12 targets last year. In the last 8 games, he had 114 attempts and 36 targets. So he went from 94 yards in the first 9 games to 550 yards in the last 8 games. Obviously, it had something to do with the fact that Jay Ajayi was traded. But, I mean, if you're a Kenyon Drake owner and you're looking for a little bit of hope coming out of that game,
God bless you for clinging to hope.
I guess that's
God bless
that's
you.
what you should look for. So why don't we move on now to the Bills playing at the Colts. I think Marlon Mack was probably the most added running back this week on the waiver wire. It seems like he really hurt Nyheim Hines' production, definitely in the past game. Nyheim Hines went from, I think it was 9 targets last week to only 3. He only got the 3 carries this last week compared to the week before when he had, I think it was 15. But, we'll see because obviously Frank Reich coming from that Philadelphia offense, they like to use all of their running backs. So we'll see how this backfield shakes out. But as far as a bye week replacement, I think Marlon Mack is pretty solid for sure. And I don't know what's going on with Jack Doyle or T.Y. Hilton, but if both of them are out again, I think Chester Rogers is a solid play. He should continue to lead the team in targets. I don't know if Tre'Davious White would I don't know if Chester Rogers would draw that Tre'Davious White coverage.
I guess he must, right?
Like it's either him or Ebron.
You would think. And at that point, first off, all I heard when you said that was Ebron.
Yeah, he's been eating, man. He's
already
set his career high in touchdowns.
Everybody forgets about Eric Ebron, right? Now, we're going to nerd out for just a second here. When Eric Ebron came into the league, nobody remembers that we had never seen a tight end of that athletic caliber. Now, he came in on Detroit and everybody was overhyped. You recall, if you did fantasy back then, Ebron was this tight end that was just going absurdly high.
Thought he was the next Jimmy Graham.
We thought he was better than Jimmy Graham because at least Ebron's a man. I've shared my opinions on Jimmy Graham and why I think he's been subpar in Green Bay before, because I think Aaron Rodgers likes himself somebody that's going to go fight for that extra yard more than anything. But all I'll say is that we're finally seeing Ebron.
Ebron. The guys in Vegas have the Bills. What? Dude?
No, listen. So you didn't ask me what the defense I chose on Daily Fantasy was across the board.
Okay, who?
The Buffalo Bills have surprised. The defense every week, even against good offenses, has done work. They've caused turnovers. They've caused just even games that they are being scored on. The Buffalo Bills defense is one of the lowest priced defenses that has been getting points. I know. Listen, I know what Andrew Luck did, spreading the ball last week and all that. That Bills defense, sneaky good.
They're giving 7.5 points to the Bills. That's a lot, man.
I'm just saying.
I thought it would be way closer to a pick on that.
I'm just saying, don't sleep on those Buffalo Bills. Remember the last team that did? What did the Vikings lose? Was it at home?
At home to a rookie quarterback.
Right, and it was 21-0.
Now, speaking of the Bills, we're not going to see that rookie quarterback for a couple more weeks because Derek Anderson was named the starter there.
Off the streets, by the way. He was signed literally off the streets.
Now, he does have some experience running that offense. As the backup in Carolina, he's familiar with the offense. But then again, an aging backup quarterback coming off the couch.
Listen. That offense has been weird. The defense though has been sneaky good.
Maybe that has something to do with the spread. But you look at really the only fantasy relevant player on the Bills. It's LaShawn McCoy. 16
Your
carries
future
last
Philadelphia
week.
Eagle,
Hopefully,
McCoy.
yeah. 16 carries for 73 yards. The Colts are actually giving up the fourth most receptions to running backs, and that's definitely one of the strengths of LaShawn McCoy. So I think he's another one of these middle-tier DFS plays that you can
That's a great
throw
call,
into your lineup.
especially when you consider Derek Anderson off of the streets. So it's very, very hard for a quarterback to come right in and have a connection with a receiver. You got timing, you got all, but having to lob the ball to a running back, I could do that.
Both of these teams coming off of a loss. Nathan Peterman just came in and he was just like,
It's Nathan
"Hey guys,
Peterman.
remember me?
Right.
I throw pick sixes
Right.
like I'm getting paid to throw pick sixes." He lost the game for him last week, and I think that definitely had something to do with the fact that they brought in Derek Anderson to come in for this game.
While we're talking about this, and please continue.
Okay.
I'm going to let's just take a look, right, wrong, or indifferent, right now at what that Bills defense garnered off of a loss last week.
Okay.
Just to follow up to my point here, if you don't mind.
I'm going to move on to the next game.
Do that.
And when you're ready, throw in that Bills stat. But this next game should be a pretty easy one for you. It is the Tennessee Titans coming off of a loss against the Ravens versus the San Diego Chargers coming off of a win against the Browns. The Chargers are minus 6.5 in this game. The Tennessee Titans offense is putrid. They are by far the biggest disappointment as far as AFC teams go in this season so far. However, their defense is really good. They're in the top 10 against every one of the four major position groups in fantasy football. But
their offense is garbage.
There's no one you can start on this Tennessee
Except
offense.
They tore up my Philadelphia Eagles. So
what a weird game, man.
I would love to comment on this, but I feel like I'll just be silent from here. So go ahead.
Pretty much sit everyone on the Titans. Honestly, if you have any Titans, I think you should probably drop them, especially with the bye season being in full swing. Next week, I think there's 6 teams on bye. So, they're probably going to be the first ones you drop in your leagues. I know in a couple of my leagues, I had Deion Lewis. I dropped him.
I've seen Derrick Henry floating around.
Derrick Henry's
the only
available
name
in
you
a lot of
don't see floating around is Corey Davis.
Which to me is like,
some week you're going to have 27 points and the rest you're going to have 3. So good luck with that.
yeah, he's another one of these boomer bust wide receivers.
Yeah.
We're just waiting. We've been waiting for him to emerge.
Fifth
Same
overall
thing with-
pick last year. Like, you know what? I watched him in college. I get it.
Same thing
But
with all these other Tennessee Titans wide receivers. They've all been high draft picks. We're looking at Taywan Taylor and Tajay Sharp. They're all three of these guys. They're just. It seems like they got three busts.
This is what happens when you don't accept your number one as your number one. When you refuse to believe that your whatever late round pick it is can't be the number one. You know who the ball mover was last year? Rashard Matthews.
Right, and then they let him go.
Because you can't accept your number one if he's not some top pick.
Right.
That's wrong.
Yeah.
Tom Brady was the last pick in the draft. Like, sometimes you got to let go of this notion.
No, he wasn't the last pick. He was in the 6th round that year.
Oh, tomato at that point. Tomato at that point.
As far as the Chargers go, they have, as I said, the Titans' defense is really good, but you're starting the 3 studs, Rivers, Gordon, Keenan Allen. It doesn't matter their matchups. You're going to start all 3 of them.
No, I got one question for you on that Chargers offense, because
Okay.
you're right. I mean, past those 3, listen, like you said, if you have Melvin Gordon, you've been fantastically happy.
Right.
Keenan Allen, you're not sitting him. Let me ask you about 2 names that I've just...
With the Williams bros?
Well, first off, I used to love Tyrell Williams. I had him last year, but I'm going to chalk him up as he's going to be way too inconsistent.
Yep.
Mike Williams, they drafted 7th overall. He's
2
had
years
some
ago, yeah.
big games. He had a back injury. Are you starting Mike Williams this week?
So, in that full point PPR league that I was talking about, where I went 0 RB, Keenan Allen was my my number 2 wide receiver behind Antonio Brown, and I drafted.
I can't believe that I did not Of course, I was against this 0 RB thing, and this year it just smacks you in the face.
Well, I mean, I'm 3-3 in this league. I kind of got some bad luck because I was counting on Alex Collins as my number 1 running back, and we've seen Jarvis Allen just coming in and just vulturing so many touches from him the first couple weeks of the season. So it hasn't really worked out all that much for me.
But I guess my point is, though, it could have worked out a way worse had you gone if you were the back end.
It was between
Listen,
Alex Collins and Derrick Henry,
right.
and thank God I chose Alex Collins.
But it could have been between Leonard Fournette and Devontae Freeman.
Right.
Instead, you made the smart move. At least you blew it in the 4th.
Yeah.
Not the 1st and 2nd. So
Yeah, I mean, Keenan Allen hasn't scored a touchdown since week 1, but we saw him involved in the run game last week. He
That's
had
not
41
gonna
rushing yards. I mean, yeah, it was gimmick plays, but thank God they ran him because he finished the game with over 100 total yards, which is awesome. But yeah, I mean, when you look at this Chargers offense, I dropped Mike Williams in that league where I pretty much had him as a handcuff to Keenan Allen because we all know Keenan Allen's injury past. I wanted to make sure I had that covered, and he was the drop that I made this week to pick up my backup quarterback, which was Joe Flacco, because Aaron Rodgers is on bye. So
I understand, though. Listen, I think that there's just too many mouths to feed.
I mean, it's a good offense, so it's not like you're ever gonna feel bad about starting any of them. I mean, talking Mike Williams and the backup running back there.
I'm glad you brought that up. That was my transition.
Yep, Austin Eckler. He's been playing really well. Although last week was, as we were saying, I was expecting his touchdown regression to come, and we saw it. He didn't have a touchdown last week, and he wasn't targeted at all either. So that was probably due to the fact that Melvin Gordon had 3 touchdowns and 130 rushing yards, so 18 total touches or 18 carries, and he was targeted 4 times. So Melvin Gordon is obviously a beast, and Austin Eckler, yeah, if they're blowing teams out like they were last week, yeah, Austin Eckler is probably going to be a little more involved.
He just reminds me of God. Why am I blanking on his name? Please help me out here.
Who?
The white running back D2 played for the Chargers, cleaned up as the receiving running back. What was his name?
Oh, are you talking Danny Woodhead?
Danny Woodhead.
Oh, yeah.
There was a time and place where Danny Woodhead, even though they drafted Melvin Gordon, I guess last year, 2 years ago,
Well, Phillip came out in the offseason and said that he's expecting Austin Eckler to be their new Danny Woodhead.
That's my point.
And to see him not targeted at all in this game is kind of weird. But like I said, they were up big. They got 3 touchdowns from Melvin Gordon.
And that's going to happen. Listen, Melvin Gordon can catch the ball. So you are going to have weeks with Eckler that he does nothing. But then you're going to have weeks where, at least in terms of the bye weeks and the daily fantasy plays, he's the difference maker.
Yeah. Let's move on to another AFC South game. We talked about the Titans. Let's talk about Texans at Jaguars. Texans coming off of a win against the Bills. The Jaguars coming off of a loss to the Cowboys, and Vegas has the Jaguars favored by 5.5 points here.
So with this game, you know what? Between these two teams, good luck trying to guess based on stats, play, whatever you want to factor in. If you're willing to bet this game, God bless you, because you could not.
Funny you say that.
You could not pick two teams that have just been more off base on a week-to-week standpoint than what we all thought than the Texans and the Jaguars.
So I got a buddy at work. He's a big gambler. He's actually the one that gave me this ticket. This is a Delaware.
I see you looking
Delaware
at this
lottery games.
What year is your friend betting in? The year like 1992.
He's a little older, but he actually had a 7-team.
I didn't know people still had bookies.
No, this going down to Delaware, man.
To go over to Jersey like the rest of us with the new FanDuel.
I guess where he lives, it's closer to go to Delaware. But so he had a 7-team parlay a couple weeks ago. I think it was $2,800 on it, and so he's been riding high. And he's told me that the lock of the week is Jaguars over Texans this week. Jaguars coming off of 2 disappointing losses.
He's basing that off of a fired up defense.
Yeah.
You can't call anybody that starts Blake Bortles at quarterback. I don't care. Blake Bortles is the starting quarterback. Your starting running back is out. None of those receivers are actually a starting receiver on the other team, on any other team, except maybe in the slot. No such thing as a lock when you're playing with half a deck of cards, especially when you have a Texans team. Let's be honest. They've just not produced. They are not playing with a half deck of cards. I mean, D-Hop has come out and made some spectacular catches. We talked about Fuller. You never know what week Will Fuller is going to come out with.
A Will Fuller game.
A Will Fuller game.
Right.
You know what?
But it goes. He's handcuffed with Deshaun Watson. When Deshaun Watson plays well, it seems like Will Fuller plays well.
And you know what? To me, this is one of those games. This is not a lock. This is a Grinch game. 40-foot pole. No, thank you. I've seen nothing from either team that tells me I have any reliable statistic to back up. There's nothing that has. Listen, after last week with the Jaguars, there is nothing anyone could point to me and say, "Oh, this is why they'll do good this week."
Yeah,
that Dallas team was garbage.
I guess it's just going off of instinct that you look at this defense. That's they're giving up the fewest fantasy points to receivers, the second fewest to quarterbacks. 6th fewest to running backs, 10th fewest to tight ends. They're in the top 10 in every group. They were supposed to be the best defense in the league. They are definitely still in the top 3.
They're not out here playing the Cardinals.
Right.
They're out here playing a team that, in theory, could be a loaded cannon any day of the week. They just haven't produced.
And last year in that 5-game stretch,
right.
Jaguars were one of the teams that Deshaun Watson
diced.
Yeah, so diced. I mean, it's a division game. We'll see what happens.
And you can't forget too, on the other side of the ball, J.J. Watt has been a beast.
Yeah, he really has, man.
You never know which type of game he's disrupting, and Blake Bortles just strikes me, especially without Fournette. Ooh, I don't know. I'd chalk JJ up for at least one hard sack.
Well, there's rumblings that this might be the week that Fournette comes back.
Sure.
And if it wasn't for the thing that we missed on this last preview, the Titans allowed 11 sacks last week. So I'm sure that kind of threw off the sack leaders. But up until last week, the two Watt brothers were
leading
1 and 2, which is crazy. When you could sit like their dad must be just sitting back going, "Yeah, those are my boys."
Some good genes on Purdue. Yeah, where's the milk coming from that boy's been drinking? Pass it on.
Country strong,
right?
Man.
I'm not making the NFL. You're not. I'm turning 30, so I'll take what JJ's dad is drinking. Thank you.
Yeah, you look at the Texans. Lamar Miller actually had 15 carries last week, which is surprising because I thought we'd start seeing Alfred Blue kind of take over that number one role. But, with Deontay Foreman coming back, don't be fooled by Lamar Miller. He's not good. He stinks.
Right. And Dante Foreman at any given point could actually take over Alfred Blue and Lamar Miller just based on the kid's talent.
Right. I mean, he is coming off of an Achilles injury, which is very hard to come back from. But we've seen guys coming back from that over the past couple of years. So, I wouldn't bet on this game at all. My buddy Chris, you're crazy.
And from a fantasy standpoint, we'll be quick because we just talked at length of this game.
Yeah.
Listen, Houston has not played receivers really worth the, they've been garbage again. They're 24th against receivers. So actually, they're pretty good. I apologize. I meant to say more towards the quarterback. There is no rhyme or reason to how this game is going to go. I am not I sat Will Fuller. I sat Lamar Miller.
Yeah, I'm sitting Will Fuller this week too.
I'm staying away.
On a team where I have, I think, 4 or 5 guys on bye, but it's too inconsistent, man. I need to see it more.
I went and picked up Willie Snead because I can't see this game. This game is unpredictable. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Unpredictable game on all sides of the ball. Fantasy betting, whatever you want to call it. Unpredictable game.
Let's move over to some NFC East games. We got the Cowboys going to the Redskins. Cowboys coming off of that big win against Jacksonville. The Redskins
was a fluke.
The Redskins win over Carolina. What does Vegas have this game? They have the Redskins as the favor by 1.5, which is.
I hate to say this. I hate.
That's just the home. That's just Vegas giving.
I also think
the home team.
There's a slight chance. Very slight chance.
Is it a slight chance?
If I could hold up a pin and show everybody listening the size of a chance I think that this statement could be true.
About the thickness of this index card.
Right.
Here?
The Redskins might be somewhat legit this year.
Think so?
I hope not, but they could be. You know who's not legit this year is the Cowboys. That was a fluke.
So with Big Ben, Aaron Rodgers, and Russell Wilson on bye, I think Prescott is an interesting replacement if you're really hurting, if you're in one of these 12-team leagues where, as we said earlier, Baker Mayfield's not available, maybe Joe Flacco's not available. I think Prescott might be a last resort type play because if he can do what he did against Jacksonville, I think he can easily do it against this Redskins defense. Yeah, they haven't played all that bad, but they haven't been great either. We saw them get absolutely destroyed Monday night last week against the Saints. I think, honestly, if you could have put 85 Bears against that Saints defense, I think Drew Brees would have still lit them up. But
they beat the Packers. Listen, I'd be the first person to say I hate the Redskins. Not as much as I think that Dak coming out doing good 2 weeks in a row is like somebody winning the lottery 1 week and thinking it's happened again. But that's just me being a homer hater. The stats are there.
Yeah, we got to put our.
I try. I guess
backwards.
Listen, let me take my fanship out of it. Let's just look at. I still don't understand how that happened last week. I don't get it. I don't get it either. No sense to me mentally.
I thought Zeke was pretty much all they had, but obviously they got Cole Beasley too.
Beasley?
2 touchdowns, 100 yards, 9 catches on 11 targets.
What is he, Adam Thielen light right now?
I guess so. You look at the Redskins, though. Another one of these probably cheaper running backs that you might be able to play in DFS. Thompson. He has a pretty. I mean, the Cowboys are giving up the 7th fewest fantasy points to running backs, but at the same time, they're tied for 4th most receptions allowed to running backs, and so I think maybe Chris Thompson's not a bad play here. So if you got to play him and he's active. Play him, he shouldn't be all that bad. And Vernon Davis, the Frank Gore of tight ends,
he really is, and that's the funniest thing I've ever heard put. I mean, both from the Niners, nonetheless.
So the guys that I would sit in this game is probably Adrian Peterson, as I said, 7th fewest fantasy points allowed to running backs by the Cowboys. But he's not involved in the pass game really, so don't worry about him catching any passes. So why don't we move on to the next game, which is the Giants at the Falcons. Giants coming off of that Thursday night loss to your Eagles, and the Falcons coming off of that win against Tampa Bay. Let's see how Vegas has this game. They have, let's see, boom, 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 boom. I cannot find this game.
Well,
Where the hell?
Why you look that up?
Okay.
I'm just going to put some fantasy stats here against the Giants defense.
Oh, here we go. They have the Falcons -6.5 on Monday Night Football.
Now, the reason I think that is because the Giants defense is absolutely miserable at playing the pass. Whether that pass is going to a wide receiver or actually they've been playing the pass. I'm mixing my numbers up here. The Giants defense has not successfully defended. They're middle of the pack against the run, right? Passing to the running back, all this. They've actually defended the pass somewhat decently, so I apologize.
They're giving up the 4th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers and the 5th fewest fantasy points to tight ends.
Sometimes I get mixed up, folks. You know how you'd think you'd seed 1 through 10, and then 1 through 10 for defense means they're garbage. But my point is, listen, we saw what happened last week, right? The Eagles running backs did not win that game. It wasn't all on the Birds running backs. I think that this week you're going to see a Giants team exposed.
Okay.
I think Austin Hooper is a legitimate weapon week to week, and I could see him coming out and catching a touchdown.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Now, my reasons behind that, especially Calvin Ridley got bumped, right? He got a little hurt. We know Julio's stats in terms of...
Mohamed Sanu's a little hurt, too.
Right. Julio's going to move the ball. It doesn't matter what corner's on him. Matt Ryan's going to throw the ball. It doesn't matter what defense he plays against. The key to the Falcons and any fantasy person on the Falcons, because if you have Julio, you start Julio, is figuring out who's catching the touchdowns this week. Austin Hooper. Austin Hooper has randomly become as good a tight end as anybody else at this point, not named Zach Ertz or Gronk or
Travis Kelce, yeah.
Right. You take out that top tier, I would probably put Hooper in that Ndoku range at this point. And I think that this week's going to prove no different. Listen, the Giants, we know what the Falcons' defense is. Porous. I mean, the Giants are going to be able to probably move the ball.
Yeah, Falcons giving up the 4th most fantasy points to both quarterbacks and running backs, and they're giving up the 6th most fantasy points to wide receivers. They're giving up the most receptions allowed to running backs and the 2nd most receiving yards to running backs. So I think this is another one of those top dollar running backs that actually... besides Gurley, you can play him and feel very confident that he's going to produce and
Saquon
and pay off for that value that you have to pay for him.
Right, and that's kind of my point with what I was saying with the Falcons players. They're going to have to throw that ball. There's no way around it. I mean, Tevin Coleman's done nothing. Ito Smith remains to be seen. Austin Hooper. I could see Austin Hooper coming out.
Ito Smith did have a touchdown last week. So
yeah, but I go one game at a time. Listen, I don't jump on these players after one game because this is the NFL. Everybody's there for a reason. The talent is there.
And with Coleman being out, these are the only 2 running backs they have. So we'll see how they decide to split up the touches between the 2 of them.
I really do think that the low-end flyer on this game is Hooper. I think that he could come out and actually have a pretty big game against the Giants. I know tight ends haven't done that notoriously this year, which is ironic. Last year I played every tight end that ever played the Giants. Right. But I think that Hooper, this week, again, Ridley's banged up. Sanu is banged up. They're going to throw the ball to somebody. And then flipping to the Giants, if you have a Giants player and you're not starting him, tight end decide. Randomly, I don't know. I guess the Falcons somehow know how to defend that one position, or maybe it's just that the receivers can just do whatever they want.
Yeah, I think just teams are just not even focusing on the tight end at all.
Odell, Sterling Shepard. I think Eli's a good bet, a plug-and-play quarterback. You know? Maybe. I mean...
Yeah.
That's all I can say. It's going to be a shootout.
All right, let's move on to the Panthers playing the Eagles. As we said, the Eagles are coming off that win. Panthers coming off of that loss. And I'm sure, Vegas has the Eagles -4.5 playing at home against the Panthers. What do you see going on in this game?
Listen, let's start on the Panthers side of the ball offensively. One thing has been for certain this year against the Eagles. Devin Funchess. He is the type of receiver that the Eagles have struggled to cover. A bigger body with some speed. We saw Corey Davis do it to him. We saw, you know what I mean? The bigger receivers with speed have caused issues. They did well defending the Giants receivers last week, right? But neither are that Corey Davis or Devin Funchess size. And they cannot, and for whatever reason, they had trouble. So I'm looking...
Funchess is another guy that mossed a dude in the end zone last week.
Funchess has benefited quite a bit from a banged-up Greg Olsen. DJ Moore has just not been what they thought. Listen, this is my hometown team. I love the Eagles. I am starting Devin Funchess this week. I know his projected points are low, comparatively speaking, but until I'm shown otherwise, I don't see why you wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, McCaffrey, I think, is another one of these top dollar running backs that you can plug and play in your DFS lineups. The Eagles are giving up the fourth most receptions to running backs and the eighth most receiving yards to running backs. So another one of these top dollar running backs that you could definitely play DFS and definitely get your bang for your buck. Paul was also lovely enough to give us some awesome stats for Cam Newton versus the Eagles. In his 4 career games, he has under a 60% completion percentage, 6 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. He did have 4 rushing touchdowns, so that might be something to keep an eye on. But yeah, Cam Newton versus the Eagles has not really been all that great.
The one thing I would be watching out for in this game is that it depends on what D-line you're going to see from the Eagles. If you see the Week 1 D-line, I've never seen a defensive line play a pass-catching running back better than you saw the Birds play Devontae Freeman pre-injury. It was ridiculous watching them shade off him and come in. McCaffrey is more talented, gets more opportunities, but don't be surprised to finally see an Eagles D-line that comes out swinging correctly. Mm-hmm. But they're going to move the ball. Listen, someone's getting the ball, and most likely it's probably going to be Funchess or McCaffrey. Sneaky guy back, though, is Greg Olsen. He had the targets last week. Cam missed him on a wide open end zone attempt.
Caught 4 of 7 targets for 48 yards, and he would have had that touchdown.
Should have had that touchdown.
Yeah.
So, Greg Olsen's another guy that people had dropped because of the injury. I scooped him. There's not enough good tight ends to justify not doing it. But
in one of my leagues that I drafted Greg Olsen, I dropped him after the injury, made a trade for Jimmy Graham, and I was able to pick him up last week. So I'm riding with the two of them, and hopefully after another couple weeks, Greg Olsen can show that I don't need to carry 2 tight ends.
And let's use that to transition to the other side of the ball. The best tight end in football, ladies and gentlemen, Zach Ertz.
Oh, yeah. I'm
starting Zach Ertz. If you have Zach Ertz, you're starting him. And Carolina, that is Carolina's got a good defense, right? But they're middle of the pack against the tight end.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I wouldn't call them a good defense. They're just
better than
bad.
Average. How about that?
Yeah.
They're better than average. I think Zach Ertz is going to have a game. In terms of the Eagles running backs, throw a dart. Good luck. I'd stay away. I know Carolina hasn't defended the run great, but you can't tell me which one of these guys is actually going to come out and get the ball.
It seems like Lindell Smallwood's going to get the majority of the carries, 2 straight weeks where he's gotten more work, 18 attempts last week.
Yeah, but Clement was a little hurt. 11. I don't know if they're just trying to make sure that Clement doesn't get hurt to the level of J.J. Because they like Clement more.
Right, and he's definitely the more explosive
exactly.
of the two.
So, you know what? At this point, look, I have Smallwood, too, on the team. I have Clement. I actually have them both benched because you just don't know.
Yeah.
It's just a guess.
So the best matchup for this Eagles team against the Panthers is in the wide receiver group. The Panthers have given up the 10th most fantasy points to wide receivers, and I got to eat it on this one. I told people to sit Alshon Jeffrey last week playing against Xavier Rhodes, and he ate. He had the 2 touchdowns, 75 yards. I don't know if it was
Carson is a stud.
Carson is really good. That he is. Going forward, we'll see. The Eagles played the Giants last week. I'm sorry. It was Janoris Jenkins that I thought was going to be struggle for Alshon Jeffrey, and it wasn't that way at all.
The Giants are one of the best teams against the receiver this year.
So,
I think Alshon is going to be – you start him
each week. Especially this week. I think this is the best matchup he's going to have over the next couple weeks. Last week, with Paul, we kind of highlighted Alshon Jeffrey's schedule, and it does not look good for a wide receiver. But if he can go up against Janoris Jenkins, catch 2 touchdowns, he's got another matchup against Jenkins. I think maybe 4 or 5 weeks from now. So, play Alshon Jeffrey. I'm sorry to all the people that I told you not to play him. I apologize. Let's move on to the next game. I think that's good for that one. The Saints coming off of a bye playing at the Ravens, who have the number 1 defense in fantasy football. They're giving up the fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks, to tight ends, the second fewest to running backs, third fewest to wide receivers. They're coming off of a win against the Titans in which they had 11 sacks. That's 11 sacks.
And you know what the problem with this type of game is, though? is in theory on matchup, you'd say, feign your Saints players. You're not feigning Michael Thomas. You have to start Kamara. I mean, these are guys you drafted. We get that.
Got to start Ingram. Got to start Breeze.
We're just letting you know it might be a tough week for you. Now, on the other side of the ball, you want to win some money this week in daily fantasy or win your matchup. I believe, Matt, I'm sorry, who are you starting for your bye week quarterback?
That's Joe Flacco.
That would be Joe Flacco.
Playing against the Saints, who are giving up the most fantasy points to both quarterbacks and wide receivers.
And there's not one team that has a more complete trio, the keyword is trio, of receivers right now than the Baltimore Ravens. Not one team has three more, maybe the Packers, but they haven't all been on the field at the same time.
Maybe
the Chargers, but they're...
maybe the Patriots might have something to say about that as well.
I disagree, though. You look at the targets, the volume, and the work each one of these three has done. And I think the Saints are going to be... listen, I don't think you can go wrong choosing pretty much any one of them.
John Brown definitely took a step back after the first couple weeks of the season. He was playing well. Playing great, really. He only had 3 targets last week for 2 catches for 28 yards. Crabtree showed us all that he probably is still the number one receiver there. Had 93 yards and a touchdown, 6 catches on 9 receptions. The thing for me that was really encouraging was seeing the fact that Javaris Allen only had the 1 attempt, although it was not encouraging to see Gus Edwards come in and get 10 touches.
A who's who of who.
I mean, Alex Collins, I've been saying it. I have him in a lot of leagues, and it was awesome. Seeing him get 2 touchdowns, 19 carries, 54 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was great last week. Hopefully he can keep that going. But as you said, obviously in this game, the matchup that you want to exploit is Joe Flacco and these wide receivers against this porous Saints pass defense.
And this is one of those weeks you could see John Brown coming out and catching 2 touchdowns. It might be on 4 catches, but he could end up with 100 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Easily, yeah. Looking at the Saints running backs, I think before their bye, it was a big problem. A lot of people were freaking out. Alvin Kamara had, 3 or 4 points in a standard league 2 weeks ago, and Ingram came back from the suspension, got 16 carries, 3 targets, finished with about 75 total yards and 2 touchdowns. So hopefully the 2 of them can get back to their 2017 form where they were both top 10 running backs.
I'm guessing if you have either one of them, you probably don't have much of a choice in terms of not
you
starting.
Gotta play him.
So
you got to play him. People drafted Mark Ingram and they were sitting on his bench for the first 4 weeks for a reason.
Stranger things have happened than people burning the top-notch Ravens defense. So you'll be fine.
Let's move on to the Browns playing the Buccaneers. This is another easy one. Basically, start every single Brown you have.
Ndoku.
The other guy that I think is a sneaky play here is Duke Johnson. We saw him get way more involved last week than he was all season. Had 5 targets, caught 4 of them for 73 yards. He only had 2 carries, but turned him into 36 yards, which was more than Carlos Hyde, who had 14 attempts for only 34 yards. So looking at the Bucs defense, there's really nothing that they do well. They're giving up the most fantasy points to tight ends, and they're in the top 5 for most fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. They're also at the same time giving up the third most receiving yards to running backs, which is why I think Duke Johnson may be a sneaky play, especially in DFS, one of those cheaper running backs that you can throw into your flex and feel pretty comfortable about it. Jarvis Landry had a disappointing game last week, 2 of 9, which is pretty horrible. Only had 11 yards, but he was shut down by Casey Hayward. It seems like every week there's a new wide receiver 2 for the Cleveland Browns. Last week it was this guy Ratley, 8 targets, 82 yards on 6 catches. It's a weird offense, man. But as you said, Njoku is definitely probably going to be the most consistent outside of Jarvis Landry. And as we said earlier in part 1, Hugh Jackson.
No, I like Hugh Jackman better at this point. I think Cleveland would too.
Hugh Jackson said for 2 weeks now that he wants to get Nick Chubb more involved. I'll believe it when I see it. He's only had 3 carries for the past couple weeks now. You can't help but think Carlos Hyde's every week he's gonna get another chunk taken out of his production, which for you Carlos Hyde owners out there, I'm sure you're not all that happy about. But then again, who drafted Carlos Hyde as a number 1 or 2 running back? You've been lucky getting all these touchdowns.
I
from
think
him.
we even said on the show prior to drafting season, Nick Chubb is a stud. You never put all your eggs in a basket in front of a young stud.
Yeah. Looking at the Bucks, man, holy crap! So much for the Bucks focusing on Ronald Jones over their bye week. He got 1 carry and 3 targets coming off their bye. It's more obvious than anything now that Peyton Barber is the number 1 running back there. 13 attempts, 82 yards. He caught the touchdown, 4 targets, caught all 4 of them. The guy that is really standing out is Chris Godwin. Leads the team in red zone targets. Was tied for the most targets last week with Deshaun Jackson with 9. Chris caught 6 of them for 56 yards and a touchdown. I think he's as solid of a number 2, number 3 wide receiver as you can get.
Especially when your defense is pretty bad. You're having trouble establishing a run game. They're throwing that ball a lot.
Yeah, man.
They're going to have to keep doing so.
Yeah, with an absolute horrible defense, should produce more offense. So
right.
Keep playing those Buccaneers wide receivers because you never know who's gonna emerge there. And for our last game of the slate here, we got what should be a barn burner, huh? We got the Bengals at the Chiefs. You got any DFS stacks for this game here?
Oh, guys, if you've been listening to me this year, you know Tyler Boyd and AJ Green have been a duo I've played in on quite a bit. But you know what? This week's stack will include Joe Mixon without a doubt. The Chiefs are 10th. Give up 10th most points to the running backs, 8th most to the quarterback. I mean, it's Andy Dalton, 10th most to the tight end. So, or I'm sorry, that was the Bengals.
Yeah, it's the Bengals numbers.
I got mixed up there. In fact,
they also give up.
We're talking stats.
Yeah, they also are tied for the 9th most receptions and the 10th most receiving yards to running backs. So hopefully this is another week for Kareem Hunt to be heavily involved in the pass game here.
No, that was a good transition because the Chiefs' defense is even more atrocious.
Yeah,
I just made it seem like, hey, we're going heavy Bengals. No, the Chiefs' defense is far worse. But just to stick on the Bengals stack real quick. Until proven otherwise, Tyler Boyd. They haven't overpriced him yet. You still nag him for a cheap price. I'm sticking Tyler Boyd, but yeah, the Chiefs defense, my God, 5th most points to the quarterback, 3rd most to the running back, 16th most to the receivers. But remember, this is AJ Green we're talking about, so
AJ Green, Tyler Boyd,
right. Sometimes that number
as good of a 1-2 as there is, right?
It really is. And then here's the interesting one: 3rd most to the tight end. So we saw Eifert come out briefly before getting hurt and had a really good game. Is Uzma? I mean,
Yazama. Who the hell
can you
knows how to
use
say
him?
it?
Can you use Uzma? Like,
I think you can, man.
I think this would be the week, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at Joe.
He got 7 targets last week.
Right. I mean, I think honestly, I think these main players for the Bengals, other than Andy Dalton, who I will be starting this week, by the way, just saying, I think he's a very good lower end quarterback. You really do have to start Tyler Boyd just like you have to start AJ Green. And Joe Mixon, exact same thing. And like we said, we're going Uzma. And then just a real quick flip back to the side of the ball I originally was speaking to. Listen, so far you go with Pat Mahomes. It doesn't seem to matter. To put that in perspective, Cincinnati gives up the 8th most points to quarterback. So I expect Mahomes to come out and, if the trend continues, should be having a pretty good game, especially considering that they've given up the 10th most points to the tight end. When you say that, you're not considering that Travis Kelce is one of 3 top-tiered tight ends. So you can almost expect him to come out and do some work. The real player, though, I think Kareem Hunt, like you said earlier.
Another one of these top-tier running backs.
I think he's going to come out and have a hell of a game.
Yeah.
Whether it's a shootout or not, he's one of those running backs that still gets used very heavily.
Vegas has the Chiefs favored by 6.5. They have the over/under set at 58.5. So basically,
wait till this game is 7-6.
All these stats that we said, don't worry about it all. Basically, if you have a
Bengal,
if you have a Bengal or if you have a Chief, start them. They're all going to be great. This should be the highest scoring game of the week. So build your DFS teams with these two teams in mind. And if you have any of these guys on your season-long rosters, play them all because they should all be awesome.
Especially at this point, it shouldn't even be a question either way.
Yeah. All right, so that does it for the Week 7 preview. Oh, you got something else?
We're going to wrap this series up with one strong little point-by-point breakdown for everybody.
Okay.
Just to wrap up on that Buffalo Bills defense.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I forgot to come back.
So against that Houston offense, they've sputtered 14 points. They still lost. Buffalo's defense, 14 points. This is a standard defensive scoring team.
Right, because they had that touchdown,
right.
That pick six that won them the game.
Tennessee's offense is garbage. That's fine. 12 points. Green Bay, heck of an offense. This is before the injuries. They still came out and got 6 points. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but against a Green Bay fully healthy team.
Yeah, the fact that you didn't finish in the minus hit.
Minnesota the week before, 17 points. The Buffalo Bills defense is being slept on. They're causing havoc. They might not be winning games, but they're getting fantasy points.
Okay, so the Buffalo Bills, a solid DFS play.
$3,400.
Just a solid fantasy football.
Right, you got
DST
defenses
play.
that are on buys.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you people aren't looking at Buffalo versus Indianapolis saying, oh, let's go them. But I'll leave you with that. We'll call that some Tinkerbell knowledge. Sprinkle a little bit on Peter Pan there for you. Maybe your wishes will come true this week.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. That's the Week 7 preview of the Dudes and Beer Fantasy Football Podcast. Hopefully next week we'll have the three-headed monster back if Paul is available. If not, I have another guy, my friend Steve, wants to get on the podcast as well. So should have a nice full slate for next week. Thanks for tuning in. May the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Dudes and Beer Fantasy Football Podcast. To listen to our episodes or chat with us live, download the official Dudes and Beer app, available on Android and iDevices, or visit us online at dudesnbeer.com. You can also find all of our episodes on Breach.tv, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, SoundCloud, or your favorite podcast service. Dudes and Beer is a proud member of the HC Universal family of podcasts. For more about our sponsors, podcasts, and other content, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com or download the free HC Universal Network app. Thanks for listening, everybody. And until next time, drink responsibly.